changing for someone else. So we know your conversation tonight, Kevin, is going to be life changing for someone. So we thank you for your transparency and willingness to share your journey.
No, appreciate it. Like they always say, it's time to give it back. So glad to be here.
Well, first, I know many of us know you from Bling Empire. You know, you're on that show. You've been doing this for several seasons now, but many people may not realize how your sobriety played a role in you even being able to get back into acting or into reality TV. Tell me about the role or the impact of your sobriety that actually opened doors for you to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, so sobriety, I have 100%. I have to like contribute sobriety 100% to my success right now. A lot of people say, "Oh my God, like you're so articulate, or you can really express yourself." And I learned that all through recovery, just being in the rooms, sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I remember when I first got sober, my sponsor told me, no matter what, in every meeting you go to, in the rooms of recovery, share something because you'll start to articulate your problems a little bit better, and you'll actually start creating that solution while you're speaking, even if you're in pain or misery or anxiety. So I really just learned so much through recovery, and it all started back in Philadelphia.
When people hear, and I know you've been very transparent on the show about being in recovery from alcohol, when people hear it, are they surprised?
Yeah, 100%, especially when most people hear the first time I'm sober and in recovery, when we're out at events or I'm at a restaurant or even at a bar with some friends and I'm getting them drinks, drinking water or now hopefully other non-alcoholic alternatives since I think the bars and restaurants are now listening to us in recovery that we want something that represents us. And so they're always like, well, imagine what you would be like if you did drink. You're so much fun now. Like, how do you do this? How are you social without any alcohol? They're like, I need it to relax. And I was like, yeah, I just feel relaxed now. Like that anxiety has been lifted. And so I think to me, that's where people find out first is by seeing me in social settings where alcohol and drugs are very much a culturally accepted thing in America and everywhere else in the world. But when they see how I am now and can actually hold a conversation, hold eye contact, have a meaningful conversation, make people laugh or hold space in the room, that's when the conversation happens because they want to be like that or they want to have that confidence or that lightness, that joyous, free, light spirit. And unfortunately, I have to tell them that all goes away if I have any alcohol. It used to be the opposite, right? Like in the beginning, when I was in my teens or early 20s, it worked for me. It was like my liquid courage. But eventually, it went into addiction and alcoholism. And, I was definitely an alcoholic when I was born, I would say. And people just don't realize that. So I have to share my experience with alcoholism or just explain to them in a nice way of like, hey, look, you don't, the Asian Hulk comes out if I have a bourbon with you or a shot.
I know, and I think that's such a stereotype in our society that if you drink, you're going to be more fun. You're going to, be the life of the party, that you're going to be relaxed.
Totally.
And like you said, it started out like that for you. It was your liquid courage. But
Mhm.
then soon you learned that it led to an addiction for you. And it wasn't a pretty sight. How bad did it get for you at times, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. So they always say it's my stinking thinking in recovery. Well, that's exactly what happened for me. It was so bad that even when I wasn't drinking, I could do some really stupid stuff in my life or ruin my life. I definitely could destroy anything good that came into my life
Mhm.
just because of my alcoholism. And it got pretty bad back in 2013. I was pursuing my acting and modeling back in New York City. And to be real, like I'm kind of glad I didn't have a car because I definitely think I would have gotten some DUIs at that time or hurt someone. Or I'm really glad that I didn't actually have that much money because I probably would have blown all of it on partying and stuff, but like I became a little bit more responsible when I was in lots of credit card debt. I mean, you can see online I was up to 25, $26,000 in credit card debt, which I know is nothing compared to student loans, but like that wasn't even student loans. That was just
Mm.
me trying to
That's just your
survive.
right, trying to feed
Right.
the habit that you were dealing with. Mhm.
Exactly. And so like, I literally didn't have anything. I mean, so much to the point where I started to lose my hair from alopecia areata, that stress-induced hair loss that a lot of people think is an autoimmune disease. But what I found through my time reflecting on my recovery journey is that I was getting off the drugs and alcohol during that time. And I believe it caused a lot of anxiety through uh, trying to get sober without actually getting help, by the way. Like
Mhm.
there was none of these talks. One of my roommates was in recovery and I was just like, yeah, that sounds good for you, but it's not for me. But here I am, like $26,000 in credit card debt, losing my hair. And I'm like waking up every morning, like being okay if I didn't actually wake up. Like that's the
Mm.
first and only probably time that I was serious about like, this would be great if I just didn't wake up the next morning. And it was back in New York City. It's like, I have very sad memories and lonely times in Starbucks
Mm.
cafes, just wondering what I was going to do with my life. And then I had to go back to Philadelphia because I couldn't do anything more. And I still remember my dad on the phone. Um, I got so obsessive about my health and like why I'm feeling so irritable and discontent and anxious all the time. And I was like, this one, this one little thing. I spent all my money on magic crystals and stuff like that, like,
Mm.
and like all these cleanses and these like herbs that are supposed to make you feel better. I still didn't feel better. It's like, and it was really just alcoholism, right? The isms, the obsessions. And I talked to my dad. I'm like, this is it. I researched what my problem was. It's
Mm.
my pineal gland. My third eye's not open,
Mm.
and I feel like crap, and it's all from the chlorine in the water. And he's like, and I was like, Dad, it costs like $300 for this filter. Could you like loan me that? He's like, Kevin, you don't sound good. Like, please
Wow.
come home. Like, it was really to a point where he wasn't even having confidence in me as a entrepreneur or actor or model. He's like, you just sound really horrible. And so when I went back to Philadelphia, because I was kind of forced to, like I couldn't afford to live in New York anymore, anything. Um, that's when I started to kind of get my life back together. But there was people around me who were in recovery. There's like a group of us that I didn't know they were in recovery, by the way. They just sounded great. And I loved the lives they were leading back in Philadelphia. They had really cool slogans, like one day at a time. And I was just like, that's cool. Like, where did you get that from? And lo and behold, I found out they were in recovery and dealing with their own addictions. And I found my sponsor through one of them. And a few years later, I went into recovery and started to go through the step work, got a sponsor, and laid off the alcohol forever. Well, I should say a little bit over 7 years ago, December 13th,
Mm.
2015. And it was during an Eagles game, which it wasn't because they were losing, because I can't remember if they were winning or losing that day. I just remember the really dark, deep depression
Mm.
that sat in my soul where I'm like, I can't keep living like this anymore. And at that time period, I had my hair back. I had a girlfriend at the time. Like I was doing okay, but it's just that I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired all the time. And I tried everything. I spent my money on everything, trying to feel better.
Mm.
And lo and behold, here's a free program for us, right? Accountability, like sponsorships and going through step work, and it was all free anyway. It was freely given to me. And my future sponsor said this one line that really, really resonated because I was through misery for a long time. But he
Mm.
literally said, "What if we could spare you the next 10 years of misery?" And that like hit home because I'm like, man, I'm 32, 33, whatever. And I'm like, I should have my shit together by now. And I don't. And I'm miserable. And these people aren't. And they used to be miserable like me. And they used to try everything like me. I'm like, let me give this a try. And
Mm.
so when I went into the rooms of recovery, like I felt awkward, but it wasn't because it was, 12 steps, recover, all that stuff. It was because I was had a different perception of what recovery looked like. I thought it
You
was
know
just
what, Kevin? I mean, I have to
yeah.
stop you there because that is so good. I mean, first of all, you said so many things that I want to go back on. I'm like, Kevin, you could just talk the whole time and tell us. And I'm like, really, listening to it, and I know it's going to touch so many people. I want to touch on a couple things that you said,
Mhm,
but also what we think addiction
mhm.
looks like. But before we get to what we think addiction looks like, you said something really powerful that you were at a moment that you felt like you didn't want to live.
Mhm.
Do you feel like the addiction led to the mental health, or do you feel like it started with the thoughts and the sadness, and that the alcohol was something you turned to? Like you said, all these things you were trying just to feel good.
Totally, like, we always say in the program, it's, alcohol's not the problem, I'm the problem, right? Like, alcohol kinda does what it's supposed to do, but when we have a problem mentally, spiritually, physically, alcohol is our solution. So I've always said that is that I never had a solution besides alcohol. And then some people get it confused because 'cause they're like, "Oh, well, now you got a solution, why don't you drink?" You're like a normal person. I was like, "But that's not my solution." I've seen people who believe the same thing, and it comes back worse, comes back really bad after they start drinking again. But I'd say that a lot of my life situation, feeling different all the time, like, look, race is a big part of my story just because I always use that to make myself feel different from another person. It's like even when I went into the rooms of recovery for the first time, I was like, oh, there's not an Asian person in here. They don't understand what I'm talking about. Alcoholism is a white privilege, right? But it's
Mm.
like, and then more people came in, like then an Asian girl came in. I was like, oh, well, she's not an Asian guy. She doesn't really understand. Like all these things kept me from actually hearing the message because I was looking for the differences, not
Mm.
what we had in common. And then finally, obviously, Asian guys came in and stuff like that. But I heard people talk about how they were looking for the differences all the time, never looking for things to make them feel like we had something in common. And it always stemmed from insecurity. And
Mm.
then my like wall collapsed. And I was like, wow, I do things to make myself different so I can feel
Mm.
better about myself. I can feel unique, like the terminal uniqueness that they say in the big book. And I really use that to not get help, to make it seem like this is just a me problem, and not a we problem. And the moment that I started to realize it's a we problem, that's when I started to really hear the message of addiction and recovery.
And what do you mean by a we problem? I want to dig into that a little bit more. When you say it
Yeah,
wasn't a me problem, but a we problem.
like we all have problems, but the feeling of insecurity, the rock bottom that you feel, it doesn't matter what happened, it's the same feeling. Like like it's like loss is loss. It's not for me to judge how much of a loss somebody's had because it can always be worse, right? Like I remember being in my first couple meetings, and I actually felt like, oh God, these people's problems are way worse than mine. I probably shouldn't be here. And then I'd like say like, oh yeah, like yeah, I was underneath a bridge too, homeless, like well, and I was like, I just want to fit in, like it was kind of a weird thing, even though I wasn't ever homeless under a bridge, right? It's just that I wanted to feel like a part of this group, but the way I felt like a part of this group is to make myself different first, but I kept showing up. But then me trying to fit in was like almost even like lying about like what my journey was to fit in. It was the opposite extreme, right? Like as an alcoholic, I'm very extreme. But it's like I personally like that's where my alcoholism lies is that the problem that we have is universal. It's trying to fit in. But how we do it is different, right? I did it by saying like, well, I'm an Asian guy with this experience, you're not, right? Other people can be like, well, I'm a pregnant mom that has 12 dogs and you only have 10, like, but it's the same feeling. Like it's the same way we try to solve our problems. It's just by trying to numb these problems that we
Mm.
have or these emotions that we weren't taught how
How
to
to
deal with them.
process them. Because, a lot of people, turn to alcohol. I know even particularly in the pandemic, we saw, record number of people really struggling out there.
Yeah.
And, alcohol, it initially, and that's why I think it fools you, because it initially gives you that feeling of you are
Yeah.
fitting in, or that feeling of acceptance or being able to cope. Did it make you in the early stages feel like that? Is that, what lured you in before it kind of took you down this dark path?
Totally. I remember my first drink ever. And first of all, yes, you get a little bit of a right? And then you start to forget because you get lifted out of your body. It's almost like alcohol was my first spiritual experience.
Mm,
And the reason why I loved it so much is because it really felt like I forgot I was Asian, and so did you. It
mm,
really felt like you forgot that I was Asian. I felt like I was you. You know, we had something in common. It was alcohol. It was getting fucked up, right? Like it was getting drunk and getting sloppy or not, whatever. But it's just like St. Patty's Day, I loved it because it was like I forgot that I wasn't Irish, you know? I just felt like I was just a people amongst people, and people treated me that way. And I do think part of the reason why it was so hard to get into recovery too is the lie of alcohol, which is it like in the promises, it's about living a life beyond your wildest dreams. Well,
mm.
alcohol stole that line basically and tried to portray like if you drink and do drugs and get high every day, that you will live a life beyond your wildest dream. And that was a big lie.
Mm.
So, like, that's why I think it's really important for me, at least, to see that example, to see people living a life beyond their wildest dreams, sharing about it, and being the example. Like, when it's weird, it's like I love sharing about what I'm doing in life, but it's not to make you feel less than yourself. I'm not flaunting it. I'm sharing so you know what's possible if you do get sober, or the people who aren't sober, what could happen if you practice 12 steps or go into recovery, right? Like it's that attraction that I want from being that. Because guess what? Whether we realize it or not, we were attracted to the alcoholic lifestyle.
Mm.
That was promotion, that was attracting us, And so I'm trying to do the opposite to try to undo the damage that's done. And what I love about today's journey is that we can do it now. There's so much technology. We get platforms like Netflix or this, to be able to share our experience about everything, to be that example, because I want people to know it's possible, because I didn't know that was possible. All I saw were like people in like chairs around a circle just crying, and
Mhm.
that's what I thought my life was going to be like for the rest of my life. So if you don't show what's possible, you'll never
Right.
know what's possible.
Oh, that's good. If you don't show what's possible, you're not going to know what's possible. And I think that also what you said, and I wanted to go back to this, a lot of people have a perception of what addiction looks like.
Mhm.
So they probably saw you, friends, you're out partying there, like
Yeah,
like you said, oh, they think I'm the cool guy now. I'm
yeah.
fitting in with everybody. So what do you think is the misconception, and even that you had in your own head initially, about what addiction looks like? Where do we get it wrong as a society?
The perception of addiction is what is the problem. Like we just think the worst of the worst. And the thing is, there's all levels of addiction, right? Like, for instance, there's all levels of success. There's all levels of successful startup companies, celebrities. You're not just like fucking Brad Pitt or nothing. There's all levels, right? But you're still a celebrity. Or there's all levels of startups. You could be, Amazon, but then there's other ones that are very successful that, sell for like 10 million, right? Like who wouldn't want a $10 million paycheck, right? That's still very successful. So we have all these levels, but with addiction and alcoholism, I think we just see the top level of like what we think is the worst, right? And by the way, Hollywood over exaggerates a lot of it, but it's inspired by stories that are shared, of course. But there's all levels. Like I would say I'm not the lowest rock bottom of all possible, right? Like for me, if you were literally doing heroin under a bridge and you lost all your hair and you had a needle like giving you life, like I'm probably not the right person to talk to in recovery, but I'm like, but if you had a few things in your life and you lost things, you're able to get it back, you're a high achiever or at least want to be, and you just can't really stop drinking when you say you're going to, or like, make a promise to yourself, like, I'm only gonna have one drink, or try this one, you know, I'm gonna try 90 days while I'm drinking, not to be an asshole, right? Can you do that? Can you keep your mouth shut, right? And not blow up the bridge or send out that nasty email and ruin your life? Like, can you do that? Probably not. So I'd say that's where the misconception is.
Right.
It's really an obsession of the mind, and that's where I think a lot of people mistake an addiction. And some people are successful in narrowing it into like maybe business or other endeavors. And by the way, those people aren't super happy. They even say, "Don't be like me." It's not easy, But
Mhm.
yet, we put them on a pedestal because of the success. But that takes an obsession of the mind. So my addiction level is not as high as a lot of people's. I mean,
But
low,
it
low
still
as a lot of
impacted your
people's.
life. As you say, it
Still very
caused
impacted.
you to lose a lot
You
in
still
your
got to lose it
life.
all. But here's the difference: that feeling of just giving it all over and just realizing I am an addict. That rock bottom feeling is the same, as everybody else's.
That's
And
good.
that's what I realized why the misconception is. Like, people look at the visual of what they think it would look like. But if I were to tell you all the times that it looked like I should have gone into recovery, like literally losing all my hair, my roommate stealing my Adderall, right? Like all this stuff, like, and then going through all these like miserable cleanses, being a recluse for like months because I was afraid to go out, my apartment. You would have thought I'd go into recovery then, not being able to pay, but maxing out my credit card, like all that stuff. Now today, people will probably be like, "Oh, just get another credit card, max that one." You know what I mean? But it's just like that's the first time I've ever had anything like that in my life. And so people would think that was my rock bottom moment, but it was actually at
Mhm.
an Eagles game. I had a girlfriend. I had a little bit of cash. But the night before, I had 2 glasses of wine and I chugged the shit out of that. And I realized I am not a normal drinker. And
Mhm.
I felt depression, remorse, and I couldn't be present with my dad. And it was on his birthday, December 13th. And I remember saying to myself, I can't miss another one of these birthdays. I don't have many more left with him. And I just didn't want to feel that way again. Like, I didn't want to feel remorseful from the night before of what happened with me and my girlfriend at the time. Like the maybe hurtful words I said that I couldn't control. Oh, for 2 glasses of wine, right? Just
Mm.
one. And I'm just saying, that feeling was just as bad or worse, actually, than when I was depressed in my apartment, on a cleanse, not drinking, on Adderall, trying to whatever, losing my hair. Felt worse than that. But I was like, I don't want to. There's a solution though. I'd be stupid not to take this at this time because I've been here before.
And so when you finally took the solution, you start going to 12-step meetings. You start getting in the room, you start working recovery, realize that no more denial that I had an addiction. What was the hardest part? Was it dealing with the emotions? I think when we go in recovery, people think, oh, I'm healed. A lot of people have this perception, but it's a process. And also, addiction is a disease that you live with for the
Yeah.
rest of your life. It's something that you manage when we think about it. So, what was the hardest part for you in the beginning in
I
terms of
think
in that recovery journey?
I think in the beginning was it just felt like a load of work, right? Like, for instance, I thought I was really busy back then. I wasn't really that busy when I really looked at it, because the moment that I started going to meetings every day, getting a sponsor, going through the steps, talking to other people every day about recovery, things just seemed to kind of slow down and I had more time during my day. It's weird. It's like this mind was going so fast, and then all of a sudden recovery just was like, woo.
Mm.
Things started to slow down. Like, I was like, wow, I have some hours in my time. Like an hour going to a meeting a day for a while in the beginning didn't seem like a big burden anymore. It's like I could do two if I wanted to. All of a sudden, I went from like I can't even do one meeting a day to like, oh, I have time. Let me go to another one. Um, that was the hardest, is to actually just really jump in and trust that this
Mm.
feeling of a spiritual enlightenment was going to happen on the other side, and knowing what my life would be like without alcohol or my addiction, because like I said, it was my crutch for the longest time. Like I have empathy for those who are afraid or don't want to give it up because I too was there. That's my identity. I was the party guy. I was the guy who could literally shotgun a beer faster than even the biggest Irish guy, right? Or like the guy who had the kegs, or the guy who had the best bourbon, right? And the guy who was staying out the latest and dancing and doing whatever. Like I was that guy. What am I without that guy?
Mm.
Switching my identity from that guy to a sober guy was probably the hardest. And to know and to trust like being that sober guy was going to be better than that other guy. So like that's where that leap of faith went. And I think that was the hardest part. But the moment that I started to actually get the work, going through the step work, because I will say my recovery happened by doing the steps, experiencing the steps, not just going to meetings, not just not drinking. Because I've tried not drinking for a while and it's in and out, it's miserable, right? Now it's like 7.5 years later, not drinking is amazing. It's
Mhm.
easy. It's
What
like
made you
brushing my
well,
teeth.
as you're saying this, what made you trust the process? Because I know early on, you're in there and you see, like you said, going to these meetings, but when did you know and how did you know you could trust this? That you could
I know it
trust
sounds
the
really weird. It's like,
people?
look, if it wasn't free, I probably wouldn't have trusted it a long time ago.
Mm,
Just because I'm like, oh wow, it's free. Like I am feeling just a little bit better at times. Like even if it's just like vomiting during meetings or whatever, hearing people cry. But I really do think it was getting a sponsor, like somebody who walked me through it that really made me trust it because I really looked at the people that were there to help me and they had no agenda. It was like the first time in my life they had no agenda. All they wanted to do was to see me get better. And when I went into recovery and 12 steps, I always thought somebody wanted something from me. That's how egotistical I was, right? Like
mm.
my ego was so big. I'm like, man, don't you guys know me? I used to be a New York model. I was an actor. I'm better than Philly. Like all this shit. Like it was just like high and mighty, right? And it was until I got a sponsor that really wanted nothing from me except to make me feel better, lead me through the steps, be a lending ear, give me some really good, helpful advice. And it wasn't like business advice, it was like just feelings and relationship advice, stuff like that. That I realized, wow, these people don't want anything from me except for me to get better. Like, what is this? And so that spark really kind of made me keep coming back to the rooms and saying, like, they don't want anything. They want
Mm.
my number, but I thought it was to like sell me on stuff. No, they just were like, "Hey, call me anytime." You know, it's just pick up the phone whenever you feel antsy or like feeling like you're about to like jump out of your skin or get wasted.
It was like
And
having that community around you of people that you felt like, hey, these people genuinely are invested, in me, in me. And it's so interesting because we always tell people the importance of community in
totally,
recovery is like huge. And a lot of people talk about that. But I also wonder, as you were going through this recovery journey, did a lot of emotions and things come up from maybe your childhood, just different things? Because you talked
yeah.
about the mental health. So could you talk about that a little bit? Because I think as you start to go through the steps, or if you go to rehab or however, and you start to work in your recovery, a lot of people find that a lot of stuff comes up that they have to find a way to process and get through.
Yeah, totally. One of the biggest things for me is actually when I went through step 4. Looked
Mm.
at my inventory of like why I'm resentful or angry, all that kind of stuff. What I'm
And tell us what
fearful
step
of.
4 is for people who don't know, just to
It's
make
take
sure.
yeah, it's taking your moral inventory, just writing down pen to paper, like I said, your fears. What do you fear? What is your resentments? Who do you resent? What do you resent? Right? And what are the other ones? You take your sex inventory, right? Like, have you harmed other people in relationships? And you got to go through it all. But it's not just vomiting of like what this person did to me. Then the next part is like, well, what's your part? What did you do? Like, what did it affect in your personal emotional state? Was it your emotional? Was it your self-esteem? Was it your ego? Was it your? I mean, ego is kind of a simple word to explain all of it, but it gets very specific. Was
But
it
you
your
had to
fear of
go
loss
through
of money?
that with yourself and
Step by
literally
step.
take all that. And what was that like? What was the hard part about that? And what things started to
Oh,
come up for you?
I was miserable. The hardest part is that I had a girlfriend at the time, and then I'm going through this moral inventory, and it was very depressing. It was actually, pride in reverse, right? I start to get really bad on myself and think it's because I'm such a better person. I shouldn't be having all of these problems or these resentments, Still ego. But then I remember I was in the laundromat back in Philadelphia doing my laundry when I was going through step four, and I felt a dark cloud all of a sudden just hit, like this
Mhm.
spiritual light was gone for a while because I was holding on to all of this and it was coming out on pen and paper.
Mm.
And I
And what were you
realized,
holding on to? What do you feel like you're holding on to?
I was holding on to a lot more resentment than anything, than fear. I know a lot of resentment comes from fear, but like I would just say a lot of resentment, just thinking that the world owed me something,
Mm.
or that the people in my life owed me something, or just couldn't see that I was the problem in things. And that was the hardest thing is to actually take responsibility. It's easy to, the first part is what's the resentment? Why do you resent it? That's the easiest part. But then when you have to say, like, well, what's your partner? I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get back to this later, you know? And so that was the hardest part was to really investigate in a reflective way without beating myself up, even though I did. Like what did it affect for me? Was I fear that I wouldn't get my next paycheck? Was I fear that I wouldn't have a good personal relationship with my loved ones? Like it was a lot to hold because my inventory was like this big. Like I went through it in like 6 hours with my sponsor, because then you got to share it in step five to your sponsor.
Was any of it did you find related to your childhood, and being adopted or any of did was that also did that was that a thread in there for you?
Almost all of it was from my childhood. And when I mean childhood, I even mean through college, right? Because the same stuff happened and just kind of carried on in college, right? Like, first of all, like there was a long time that I resented being Asian.
Mm,
Like I resented being Asian. I resented my mom at some point. I resented my girlfriend for a lot of different things. I resented grade school bullies, you know. I resented like everything. And that was the hardest thing to really, really put on pen and paper. It was like, wow,
mm,
it's amazing I'm still alive because I resent almost everything. And
mm.
it's just like I had to deal with that and get better. But yeah, it's weird because through the resentments, that's where you find where the chaos is made, and that's where you find you owe amends to people or places or things, whatever. And then cleaning all of that up is kind of where the spiritual experience started to happen for me. I
So
started to become a better person, even.
so you're looking at this inventory of your life through the steps, seeing the resentment you have, and owning what part you played in it and that it was even there. Because I'm sure even acknowledging, I'm mad at my mom, I'm a little
Yeah.
mad at my girlfriend, like having that and having to process that
Right.
and deal with it and then come on the other side of it and make amends. Do you feel that that's where I know you described it, you had this spiritual experience at some point. Do you feel that that began to cause you to have a spiritual experience? Or when did you start to realize that these steps were literally changing your life?
I realized during the amends process is step eight when I had to make a list and then start doing it. The first thing that I had to do was make amends to my family. And actually, that's when the real heavy burden started to lift. The weight of the darkness started to lift from doing step four. And then it sounds really mythical and magical. And it really did feel like it at the time. Like seriously, I don't think I could go back and feel that again, but it really did feel like all of a sudden it was like I didn't have like a 300-pound boulder on my shoulders anymore, or a
Mm.
dark cloud around me. Like it just felt so much lighter. And, I didn't feel so depressed about my actions because when you have that connection, when you're making amends to someone, especially someone you love, um, you start to really see their souls and they get to see your soul when you do it in person. Did it with my mom, did it with my brother, did it with my dad, like all these people that I owed an immense to. And you could just tell they really care about you and that actually you caused them a lot of emotional harm. And so to know that and to know that, and for you to know that they know you're getting better, really just gives you a sense of relief. Like, I do believe through the steps, you just become a better person, and that just feels better, I'd
Mm.
say. I did some really shitty things in addiction, and that didn't make me feel good. And then my sponsor always said, "You have low self-esteem, and the best way to build self-esteem is to do esteemable acts." And
Mm.
I took offense to that. 'Cause of course I do esteemable acts. I'm a personal trainer. I'm modeling to make Asian men look good, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, is that really esteemable? What have
Mhm.
you done in your past that didn't make you feel esteemable? Those are all good things to do. But what did you do in the wreckage of your past that you might be holding on to? And there's a lot more than I thought. And that's the thing. Started to work through that process, started to do some amends, started to even become better. And then I realized like a lot of the things that even like my partner at the time, my girlfriend, like it wasn't her that I resented really. It was the things that made me fearful, like, I resented like rich people or something, or money or white guys or something, right? I was like, it's just all tied up in relationships. And then it comes out when you're in a relationship, what you really resent or what you're really afraid of in life. And without step work, I couldn't handle a relationship at the time.
Wow. I also wonder, as you're saying this, because one of the things that you mentioned is the identity of being Asian, and Asian American. So, did that come into your process? Because you said there was a part of you that had felt that at some point in your life. Did it help you through the steps to even embrace who you were, your identity?
Yeah, it was amazing how much my sponsor was just like, "Yo, you take on a lot for Asians or being Asian. It's not for you. It's not your responsibility." And I was like, "Wow."
Mm.
It kind of hurt a little bit. So I was like, "What do you mean?" You know. But also too, being in Philadelphia at the time, I was kind of in a little bit of a bubble. Like, there's not a lot of Asians in Philadelphia at the time, back in 2006 when I grew up, or even in 2013 when I came back to Philadelphia. I was starting to find more, but we weren't hanging out on a regular like I am now in California. Like, we hang out on a regular. It's like almost like that's all I hang out with now these days. But we didn't have that community to be able to do
You were
that or talk.
shouldering, like you were shouldering, like you have to be the Asian American representative, like you have to do everything. Is that
Yeah,
kind of what you were feeling?
yeah, and that was just all just trying to feel like I belong. Like, that was all ego. But like when I switched it to, wow, I can really help people. But I
Mm.
only learned that through recovery. How just sharing this could help other people. Your story, your life experiences can help other people before you. And there's always people who are in front of you that can share their experience to you and help you out. So I didn't really realize what sharing your experience could do until I came into recovery and learning what it was like to actually give back or be of service to people, like truly be of service to people, right? And I learned that. And so I started to do that in the world. And it changed. It went into like, I need to be this guy to I need to be just of service to the community. And then that changed a lot of things. And I gotta tell you, it's still tricky for me to this day because, like, obviously I'm more in the public eye now. There's a lot more people that maybe want to take advantage of you, use your social identity to help them for their own benefits and really kind of screw you over or whatever. But the difference is I
Mm.
realized that I was at least trying to be of service. And the hard part was for me to just let go of that, just be like, it's gonna happen. I'll pray for those people. But it's just like, now what are my actions? This is the difference in the program. What are my actions? Okay. My actions is I complain a lot then. Okay. Realize I complain a lot. What can I do with that complaining instead? What can I do to help myself out, my community? Who are the right people to really help out in the community
I
now?
bet you trust yourself more now, because
You
I
gotta
think
trust
that as you
yourself.
go through this process and going through whether it's in recovery, you're going through the 12 steps, that you begin to trust yourself more and getting to the point of what I think is amazing because this journey not only helped you to get back into acting and getting
Mhm.
on the hit Netflix show Bling Empire. You said that probably wouldn't have happened had you not gone through this
One day.
recovery journey, but also you became an entrepreneur, and not only did you become an entrepreneur, but you decided to create something to help people who were in recovery, which
Yeah.
I think is like how did that happen? Did you have a light bulb moment that I don't just want to be of service, but you know what? I'm going to be a problem solver and create solutions to help more people that are just like me.
I did. In a nutshell, I can look back on my life and really track down the moments. And it was intentional, though, to be of service to a community, the Asian community, to share my experience, strength, and hope with them. Not in recovery, but also being an Asian guy. And what could I do to get out of that depression and anxiety, or get out of the unmasculine, undesirable, sexy, like unsexy Asian guy into the other guy, right? And so I went into that by just knowing that my experience could help people out. And from there, I got into like other talks, like the TED Talks and Huffington Post videos. And from there, I went from like YouTube, and then all of a sudden, that's where I was discovered actually to be on this
Well, you
show.
were discovered
Was
on
like,
YouTube?
well, YouTube and social media, like people just saw my talks and just said, like, this guy represents what we want on the show. And so, I didn't know this at the time though, because like obviously I went to LA, met some people, met the producer, and they're like, we've been eyeing you, but we just thought you lived in Philly. And I was visiting out in LA. I was like, I do. And they're like, well, you want to come hang out? And I was like, yeah, I'm looking to leave Philadelphia anyway. Like I felt like my time was done. And then I came to LA, started to meet the producers and the castmates, who are. It's funny calling them castmates because they were my friends first, but it's like now they're I call them castmates. But then from there, I realized how much destigmatizing, like even talking about Asian masculinity, how important that was. And then I realized, well, people treat me a certain way as an Asian guy because of the way I'm portrayed in media, which I have no control over. So that's why I got into acting, because I wanted to tell my stories of being an Asian male lead. And then I realized, like, okay, well, if that was my mission, it's actually happening and it actually works, because you have no idea how many messages I got from girls who were dating Asian guys who felt so bad for breaking up with their Asian guys because they were Asian.
Mm.
They were getting made fun of by their peers. And I actually called them out on it. I was like, you're too insecure. You should really make amends to this boyfriend and apologize and do all this stuff. Like, and they're like, yeah, you're right, because you're right. Like, you are like the only Asian guy that I saw at the time that was like seen as
Mm.
attractive on TV without saying it. You know what I mean? You just were. And so I was like, cool, this message really does work. So then I realized the same thing about sobriety. Like, if we don't have that to represent us, how can other people get better or know what could be better for them?
Right.
So then I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do that? I can't just talk about it all the time, right? Because that doesn't reach as many people as I'd like. Then I saw these non-alcoholic beverages show up, and I thought it was bullshit, because I'm like, yeah, they're not even sober. These founders, they're just trying to, it seemed like they're just trying to cap off of something that they thought they could make money off of. And unfortunately, I know I need to switch my mindset with this. They are doing that. Capitalism. They're making the money. I hope this is what happens, that it can inspire others to not drink as much or see it as cool. But I was like, well, what if I do that myself? Because I am sober. I know what the message needs to look like for me to get sober, and for many other people. And I wanted something that was physical, that people could carry around, like a billboard effect, you
Ooh.
know?
So wait a
So
minute. That's good. So you looked at creating, just for those who, I mean, I know we talked about it early on in the intro, but you created a non-alcoholic or alcohol alternative for
alcohol
people that
alternative.
you hope will be everywhere. But I love that you said that. I never even thought about it, that it could be a billboard, that holding a
Beautiful.
drink, or it's like a message, right? But I
Yep.
want you to share more about that, because I think that's powerful that you said that.
Yeah, because there's only so much of me or the message, or for instance, like, unfortunately, algorithms can mess us up, right? Because it's not trending right now or something. So, but what if I could have something that's in people's hands, where people are at social events and they know that my beverage Sans is like literally for people who don't drink, then, right? Sans
And then you can
Benicio.
identify other people,
Then you can identify, and that person is sober or trying not to drink as much,
right?
or whatever. They know people who are sober, and then you can feel like a part of something. That's why we have our slogan, be a part of the buzz without the booze. And it's totally true. It's like that's all I wanted to do is feel a part of all of that. And so this is our way of fitting in and being a part or standing out by fitting in. And we can actually have something that resembles us. And this is the crap that I really kind of have to rebuttal on for a lot of people. They're like, well, I'll just drink sparkling water. I was like, okay, you can, but that also tells you about you, your personality. And whether you realize it or not, every single thing you wear, do, buy,
Mhm.
drink, eat is all supporting your identity, who
Ooh,
you see yourself as.
that's
So
good.
that, yeah, right. So you can be sober and just go to a bar and drink sparkling water, but that tells you something about you. Like there is like wine drinkers tells you something about you. Oh, I'm sophisticated, even though I don't really, I think it tastes like crap, you know what I mean? Like, but I'm sophisticated. Oh,
Mhm.
I'm forcing myself to like this 200-year-old sediment crusted and ew, wine or whatever, like, or this gasoline bourbon thing. I'm a tough guy and all men drink. It tells you about yourself. But
Mm.
in the non alcoholic space, we don't have a single thing that tells us about ourselves. The
Mm.
best thing we have is we're sober, curious. Tells me we're not really sure what we are, to be real, right? Like, I
Mm.
think you need to create an identity, and that's what we're hoping to do with my beverage company. And so I realized, like the billboard effect, when people see this, I'm hoping they know, oh, this guy, this
Mhm.
person, this
Hold it up
woman, this.
again so just we can see it so people who are listening, okay. Yeah, it's called Sans There. Can they get it anywhere? Are you hoping to put it in bars across the country or just any place you go, or what's the ultimate goal, Kevin?
My ultimate goal, and this is where I know we're doing really well and we're getting that billboard effect that I want. I really hope that in every meeting that I go to, online or in person, for addiction, would have this. And by that, what I mean is like I hope to have a big enough company that we can just donate, like millions of cans a month, because that's my goal is to have this in the places that really matter, places of recovery. Bars and restaurants are great too, especially restaurants, because I think that's a great place where people are on dates and they don't know what to drink all the time. And so, like, I think clubs for, whatever parties, weddings, excuse me, burping on my beverage, but like anything where people are social, that's where I want to see it. But right now, we're mostly directly online, on our website, and we're also on Amazon right now. But we really want to go big and get this in the hands that really matter to people.
I love that. Well, this has been such an enlightening conversation with you, Kevin. I just have maybe one or two more questions for you because you mentioned having a mentor and you talk about on this journey, there are always people in front of you, but there's always people behind you that you can help along the way. But what do you feel like has been the best piece of advice that you've received on this journey? Maybe it was a mentor, your mentor, or maybe just something you heard in one of those, AA rooms, but tell me, what was that for you?
I might go contradictory to a lot of things, but there is no real originality. Like, I don't have an original thought. Everything I'm just telling you was passed down from people, experiences I've had, and I'm just sharing in my own way. Um, but it's kind of like I take what I've learned and I just either throw it away or take what's useful and make it my own. But even when I try to make it my own, it's like I'm sure someone's already said that or it's been
Okay,
done
it doesn't have
before.
to be original. I said it could be
It doesn't
something
have to be.
that came from a mentor or something that stuck out with you that's
Yeah.
helped you, been really helpful
Because I
for you.
think I think we're too busy trying to stick out too much. So we do things that aren't really authentic to ourselves. And if we're really just authentic and our originality will come out in our message. I don't really script any of these talks. I just know bullet points. I like to talk to people and things come out. And I'm not worried about what I'm going to say anymore because I'm like, you know what? I have my you, the screen, myself, and my higher power in this. And it's just like I don't even have to think about all of that stuff anymore.
Well, I love that. And I think you know what I think as I'm hearing you, it's some of the message that you got was authenticity, being yourself, showing up what you said tonight, showing up, doing the steps, and realizing that there is a great life.
Right. Well,
And-
Joe, I was gonna say
oh, go ahead.
the
Okay.
Because sometimes being yourself, maybe you shouldn't be yourself, because maybe yourself is really right now at this moment not like a reflection of who you want to be. But I just say, who do you want to be?
Oh, that's good. Good.
Yeah,
See, I'm glad you added that because I didn't even
yeah,
think about that. That was a good point. Finally, what's next for you? We see you, doing the TV thing, acting, anything big. I know we're trying to
yeah.
take your company, your beverage company to the next level so that more people have access to this branded billboard that they can carry about their identity and sobriety. But what else is next for you?
Yeah, what's next is I really hope I can carve my niche in the acting world, acting, producing. My girlfriend and I started a production company just to tell
Oh,
Asian lead love stories, and we want to be known as that company that can develop and go out there and make movies that could reshape the way Asians are told in love stories. I think the biggest thing for us, we just want to be seen as like normal people going through very extraordinary different stories. And we really want to tell our own love story, which has to do with sobriety as well. So we want to bring that out to the world. Just working on a few other projects, and which is great. But yeah, I want to really carve my niche as like an Asian leading male
I love it.
in acting. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I will say this, you're definitely good looking. I did notice that. So I
Ah,
know that I know you said that was a concern about the Asian men. So I can attest, today, and I'm sure everyone looking, but just a side joke there. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It has really been a blessing. And I know that so many people were touched here tonight, Kevin. So thank you everyone else out there who's been listening. That's going to do it for another episode of Addiction Talk. And everyone have a good night.
nice.